Now then, you're very welcome along. So we are going to dip our toes into the world of F1. Not something we cover every week on the show, but it is just one of these big gargantuan sports trundling away in the backdrop at all times. And our guest today has been working in Formula One broadcasting for the guts of the last 15 years, and she has covered over 200 F1 races, and she has a new book out as well, How to Read F1, which is an A to Z guide for new fans and veterans alike. You will know her from BBC. You will also have seen her, of course, on Drive to Survive. Jennie Gow, of course. You're very welcome. Hello.
Hello. Nice to be here. Thank you so much.
An unusual backdrop to this book. I don't say this very often about somebody who's written a book. You wrote this during your recovery from a stroke.
Yes, it wasn't as simple as I would have liked it to have been. I've never written a book before, and all of a sudden got a phone call from the BBC asking if I would like to write a book. And this was about 6 months after I'd had quite a major stroke. And my response was, you do know I had a stroke, struggling to read, write, speak. So it was a challenge, but they persuaded me that I could do it. And I did.
Great.
Yeah.
When I heard you had a stroke, obviously I would have known you from your work. I had the same thought that most people have, whether it's uninformed or not. I said, she's too young to have a stroke, 44 years of age, looks to be very fit from the outside. So that was my immediate reaction.
And it was a reaction that I think most people would have, because I didn't realise, but 1 in 4 strokes happens to someone under the age of 60. Which is quite a lot. And the more work I've done within the stroke area, the more I find that actually it can happen to anyone at any age. You don't have to have contributing factors. I certainly didn't. I literally just out of thin air had a stroke. And it's absolutely devastating. And we don't talk about it enough. And I still don't quite know why. Maybe it's because it affects the brain and people are scared to talk about things like brain damage. And it certainly has more of a stigma to it than other illnesses. And it affects so many people. It's the largest cause of disability in the world.
I understand it in very rudimentary terms as with the stroke, the blood supply for various reasons is to the brain is shut off for a short period, long period, and obviously that causes damage, and damage to your brain, not good. I was reading in your situation 2 years ago, 44 years of age, healthy, but you had a kind of viral infection. So you were coughing. I mean, trust me, the listeners will know, Jennie, I've been coughing for the last 10 days. I can't shake it. So you were coughing, and this resulted in a slight tear in a blood vessel in your neck, and suddenly blood clot, and your husband finds you in the bathroom, and I think your daughter is propping your head up with a pillow. Like, it's just so sudden, so traumatic. Is your memory of kind of going about your business and then suddenly waking up in a hospital, or did you know it was happening?
I didn't know what was happening. I barely remember like reaching for the sink to try and claw onto something. But the memory is very vague. And then it's just like a shutter going up and down. I can remember bits of that day, but not all of it. And then, of course, you get told what's happened and your memory takes over from that. So kind of piece together what's happened. But I wasn't aware of as much as everyone else. And for my family who were there, I think they almost had it harder because they were aware. They had to have those conversations that I might never be able to speak again. It might be fatal. They were going to operate. All of those things that I was kind of oblivious to. But I mean, it's so sudden and so life-changing. And the longer that clot is there stopping the blood from flowing, as you say, the worse the damage can be. And no stroke is the same. Every single stroke is slightly different. The symptoms, the fallout from it, the medication you have to take, it's all so very different, yet the stroke community is so strong and so supportive, that it really helped when it came to learning more about stroke and my rehab, which was long and intense. Let's put it like that.
Yes. Well, tell us about the fallout in the rehab.
So I still trying to piece together the first 2 days. So I had a thrombectomy, which is where they go in and mechanically remove that clot. And it could at that point shatter, or it could come out whole and be removed. And I didn't start speaking as quickly as they had hoped. So there was a question mark as to actually how successful that operation had been. And it took me, I think, 6 days to start speaking again. And you know what it's like. You use your voice all the time. And suddenly to not be able to communicate with your husband, with the doctors and nurses, and not to be able to kind of commute what's actually happening, it's such a strange thing to have happened. But I was very lucky with a nurse who took the time to try and get me to speak again. And yeah, on day 6, I said a couple of sounds. I was discharged from hospital on, I think, day 8. And then every day was spent with rehab, with the team of therapists coming to the house, which was amazing. And just learning everything again, from making a cup of tea to switching on a TV with a remote control. Everything had to be learned from scratch. So it was a really long, painful process.
Yes, because some people like parts of their bodies frozen, and that never changes. But you were obviously told you can fight back here to a fair degree against this.
Yeah, so I had paralysis of my right hand side, which is my lead hand. So I couldn't write and do anything with that hand, and the whole side of my body was affected. But that eased quite quickly. Whereas, as you say, for some people, it's much more physical and much more tangible. So for me, 2 years on, even a year on, I think a lot of people would say, "Oh, you look fine." But actually, there's a lot going on inside. Whereas for other people, I have now one of my good friends had a stroke 6 days after me, and we were introduced in that rehabilitation stage so we could support each other. And hers is far more physical. She didn't really have much time off work. She had those like skills in her brain still, whereas I had to do a lot more learning to get those skills back.
Okay. So, I mean, like as a broadcaster, 44 years of age, a brilliant, you're just heading into the sweet spot of your career, I would think, where you're really nicely experienced, 200 races under your belt, and like the next decade to 15 years is arguably going to be the peak of your career, and a lot to look forward to, and you lose your voice. It's nightmarish. Anybody listening to you now, if they didn't know you had had a stroke or you'd had problems with your speech in the last 2 years, would think, my God, she's got a brilliant speaking voice. I can see why she's a broadcaster. It sounds great. So, but for you, is your voice back to 100% to what what a broadcaster you were? The speeds you could speak at, the different pitches, the tones, the volume, the effort it takes to talk. I mean, so I'm yabbering on here. I'm not thinking about it overly. Whereas, somebody with a stutter, for instance, is doing quite a lot of steps to get the words out. So give us your sense of your voice, your broadcasting voice now.
So realistically, I don't think I'm not happy with it. So I've spent hours and hours trying to get my voice back to how it was. And I don't know. I don't know if it will ever be back to how it was. It's a lot slower. It's good that we're speaking in the morning, because as soon as I get later into the evening and into the night, it starts slurring. And when I first began to speak, it was very slow. I was fighting all the time in my head to get the next word. So that sped up, and even just knowing what words to say, that's got easier. But I still, even though I might look like I'm just speaking normally, in my head, it's going at 1,000 miles an hour, trying to find the right word. And sometimes it doesn't quite find the words I would like. So it's quite a humbling experience. And I've learned so much about what it must be like to be nonverbal, to not be able to communicate with the world. And I only experienced that for a very short time, but it taught me a huge amount. And now I think I'm a worse talker, but I'm a far better listener. And I think that's a really valuable thing to take from it.
Yes. So difficult, though. I mean, given your profession, it really is. So your work ambitions, have they changed? Are you determined to get back to the very top, which is where you've been? Or how do you feel about all that?
It's really difficult. I think strokes do a strange thing to you, which is, well, they do lots of things. But one of the things I think everyone struggles with is emotion. And I'm far more emotional now than I was before. And I was already pretty emotional. That was just me. But I cry a lot quicker. It's kind of just there at the front of your brain. So I really struggle with not crying. So I'm doing quite well. We're speaking, not crying. So that's a tick. But getting or trying to think ahead too much, I think, doesn't do me any favors. It's like I don't have the brain to be able to think ahead and do what I'm doing now. So it's quite useful in terms of I just have to deal with what I'm doing at the minute and talking to you and having a nice conversation and raising awareness about stroke. And I can't think too far down the line.
Okay.
So yes, I would absolutely love to get back to normal. I'd say that life is never going to be normal. I still have to have a nap every day.
Right.
Because the fatigue that you get from having a stroke is unreal.
Right.
And I thought it would go. Like after 6 months, I thought, yeah, it's going to go. And it didn't. And then after a year, I thought, yes, it's going to go. Nope, it's still there. So it's like a friend that you don't want. And you have to carry it around on your back all the time. And it affects your whole life. So that's the bit that I have to kind of push through. And I'm trying my hardest. And yeah, it's just really difficult to imagine getting back to like full power.
Yeah. With
that around your neck. It's just, yeah, it's really frustrating.
Yes, I'll bet it is. Like, it's such a traumatic thing to go through. And the ramifications for your career obviously are big as well. Like, have you processed the whole thing? Do you think? Have you gone to therapy? Have you? I mean, you mentioned the crying. Where are you on that front? Because it would be very, very easy to suffer an intense depression about all of this.
And it's a very isolating experience going through a stroke, even though there's lots of other people out there. Because it's not spoken about so much, I could imagine a time in this process where if I was here on my own without my family pushing me in the best possible way, I would have just sat on the sofa, not done my rehab, and stewed on it and thought, why me? And got angry about what life had thrown at me. But at no time have I got angry about the stroke happening. I got angry and frustrated about not being able to speak, about having to learn things again, which I've learned already in my life. Having to repeat those processes. But I don't know why I haven't got angry and thought, why me? It's just something maybe I haven't actually accepted it yet. And that's going to be a battle further down the line. But I've had lots of therapy and they were amazing. But when the problem is when you're prone to crying, lots of those sessions were just literally me crying.
Yeah.
In the most, like, it was the most horrid cry that I've ever experienced. It wasn't my cry. It was like a donkey being kicked. It was such a weird cry, and no one could tell if I was laughing or crying. It was not the best cry.
Yeah. It sounds primal, guttural, like from somewhere deep down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Look, again, I mean, I don't know what you're going through, and I don't know the effort it takes to even have a conversation like this. But I mean, if you start a podcast in the morning, I think it'd sound absolutely fantastic. You know what I mean? Like listening to you, it sounds so good. It does not, it really does not sound like you've gone and are going through what you're going through, you know, which is amazing. Testament to the work you've done.
Yeah, I feel a bit like I've cheated the system. Like I've had a really good recovery, and I know I've worked incredibly hard, and nothing is good enough in my head. So I want to get better at speaking, walking, fitness, all of those things, reading and writing. So yeah, I'm going to keep on pushing. But I feel like this whole process has taught me a lot about myself, a lot about my family and friends. But also I have a second reason for being. Like now I don't have the biggest platform. I'm not kidding myself, but I have a platform, and I just want to go out there and talk about strokes and get the conversation started, or continue the conversation about how we can help, how we can change things, how research can help to make a difference, because every single second that someone doesn't get treated and they've had a stroke destroys more of their brain. So we need to be proactive and have those conversations about why stroke isn't spoken about and what we can do to change that. Yes.
Well, I mean, it's compelling listening. It seems churlish now, but I was going to talk to you about Formula One.
You know? No, it's the other part of my life, and one that I feel very passionate about. And actually, having spoken to so many of those drivers through my time in F1 and the personnel who are amazing people, I think I channeled some of them and some of what they do to get my recovery better.
Yeah.
And I always remember speaking to David Coulthard, who is a former driver, and he said, I don't want feedback about what I did well. I only want the feedback of what I can improve on, what didn't go well. And I still use that to this day of how can I get better? How can I speak better? How can I make sure I select the right words in my head? And just keep pushing. And yeah, when the therapist came and said, oh yeah, you did really well there, I was like, yeah, but what didn't I do well, and how can I improve? So yeah, the world of Formula One and my recovery go kind of hand in hand.
Good. So like, because after an incident like this, somebody might kind of lose love for those more trivial passions and think, oh, well, that's, you know, I want to focus on just, for instance, raising awareness on about stroke, or do something, you know, it's a near-death experience, is not to put too fine a point on it. I want to do something more meaningful with my life than sport, but obviously that hasn't happened to you in this case. You wrote a book about F1 during your recovery. You're still watching Formula One year-round, I presume, in a big way.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a big part of my life, and what the stroke did teach me, it wasn't that I needed to have one of those light bulb moments where I needed to go and, you know, climb a mountain.
Yeah.
See, I lost that word for a minute.
Yeah, that was so. What happens there, Jenny, at a moment like that?
Oh, so what I actually wanted to say was the mountain in Peru, which I think is called Machu
Picchu. Yeah.
I know these words.
Right, you know it. Okay, yeah.
Just can't. So in my brain, it selects the word, and then you have to transport it down to your mouth and actually say it.
Right.
And that's where the problem happens. I just can't remember some of those words.
And could you hear Machu Picchu in your brain, or you actually couldn't remember the word?
I could remember the first bit, but then I was like, I don't know what the end of that is.
Okay.
So let's bail out on that. And what's another world? I'll cling on to mountain.
Yes.
So that's
where you are. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
is that why the thought of live TV and broadcasting, that all feels a bit scary at the moment?
It's just exhausting.
Right.
So I went to Austin and did my first flyaway race, which is quite a long way to go. And it was great to be back in the paddock, to do interviews, to speak to drivers. But yeah, with something like live radio, I did not the codcast. That's not right. The podcast that I was doing is the checkered flag. And we did a version in front of a studio audience, which was live and recorded for the BBC. And you're constantly thinking on your feet.
Yes.
And trying to find the right words. And sometimes, and I think this is the same with most people, sometimes the words just don't come out the way you want them to. And everyone trips up over some words. Just for me, I know that I wouldn't have done that before.
Right.
So it's hard to admit that you're not as good as you were before when you're quite proud of trying to get back to the place that you were. It's hard to explain, but yeah, it's...
In a way, because even just that last 2 minutes there, that's an absolutely extraordinary moment that you're brave enough to come on, to know that that's going to happen. Like, anyone listening now couldn't but be full of empathy for you, sort of be inspired by you. So I kind of think, in a way, like, you going through those kind of things, broadcasting in a perverse way makes you a more extraordinary broadcaster. Like, to see someone kind of going through that, you know?
There's a rule with me is you're not allowed to be kind.
Okay, that'll set you off. It was terrible,
Yeah.
awful.
Exactly. I'm far easier at that side of things than I am at anyone being kind, because
Sure.
it just sets me off.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay, well, I'll stay mean for the rest.
Yeah.
So on Formula One, a few things to throw at you. What an interesting place it's in that we had Gunter Steiner on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he even made the point that of the current audience, and it's a big audience, but 50% of it they estimate is a Drive to Survive audience. Like, so on the one hand, after 80s and 90s kind of peak Formula One, amazing, remember the figures, and then Schumacher early 2000s, and then, from my perspective and the more casual fans' perspective, a big dip in the 2010s, and now explosion again. That is just so amazing for the sport, but it's also volatile. I mean, how can we stabilize that 50% that they're not just a Drive to Survive and maybe they'll disappear just as quickly in the next couple of years? That's kind of the interesting place F1 finds itself in, I think.
And it's the battle between the sport and entertainment. And I think a lot of the purists of F1 who have been there for years think that the entertainment is becoming too much and the sporting side is being diminished by that.
Right. What's an example of gimmicky entertainment that the purists think is a little bit too Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson?
We've seen the owners, Liberty Media, try out quite a lot of things. And, from having cheerleaders and announcing the drivers onto the grid before the races and things like that. But I think that's fine for them to try it. I think what some people have an issue with is the way that Drive to Survive comes together as a show. It doesn't reflect the season 100%.
Yes. I've heard the editing and the editorial line is a little suspect.
It's so cleverly done. And I have to say at this point, yes, I'm BBC, but I also have appeared on Drive to Survive as one of their kind of expert F1 analysts. And I think it's brought so much to F1 and so many fans to F1 that I don't think there's a place for people to be elitist about it. I think if people are coming to F1, we need to embrace them. This is the future of our sport. And yes, it might not be exactly what someone who's followed the sport for decades would hope. But actually, it's not their sport.
Yes.
It's something that everyone can have an attachment to. And just because you maybe like Lando Norris and you're a McLaren fan and you've come to it because you identify with him and care about him, it doesn't make you less of a fan because you don't know what a V12 is.
Yeah.
So I just think we need to say, yeah, come and enjoy it. And we will make this, we will make it work for everyone, or try to.
One of the issues I sort of have with the sport, I'd be curious for your thoughts on it, is like, so when the 90s where I, couldn't get enough of it and watched it all the time as a kid, into the 2000s, it felt like there were more drivers winning, or certainly less sustained periods of dominance. But at the moment, obviously, Verstappen, I mean, that crescendo in December 21 with him and Hamilton, hot on the heels of Drive to Survive, that was like, oh my God, a peak moment. I mean, the first race of the season can't come around soon enough. And subsequent to that, we've had 2 years of total Verstappen dominance. I mean, just really dull, I suppose, if you're looking for more of the Hamilton v Verstappen stuff of 21. And look, he had a bit of a wobble this year, but at Sao Paulo with that extraordinary drive in the rain where he won from 17th place, he's probably going to see this one out. And so that will be 4 in a row. And before that, it's Lewis Hamilton, who, look, I know for a UK audience it's amazing, but it's still 6 of 7. And then before that, it's Sebastian Vettel with 4 in a row, and then your Schumacher's 5 in a row. And I suppose a couple of races into a lot of seasons, it feels preordained that these drivers are going to win. Whereas the 90s, it's, of course, Schumacher's there, but it's Damon Hill and it's Villeneuve and Mika Hakkinen, and it's a bit more vibrant. And I sometimes dominance is interesting to watch. Like Tiger Woods was interesting to watch in a way, and I'm sure at times the likes of Hamilton and Schumacher and Vettel were interesting to watch. But it's not as interesting to talk about or to cover or to kind of get people juiced up. So I don't know, short of making all the cars the same and let's see who comes out on top, I don't know how F1 gets around that kind of tendency towards dominance.
Honestly, I think this season has been one of the best we have ever had.
Right, okay.
If I think back through all the years I've watched F1 and worked in F1, the levels of excitement for every race, going into every race and not knowing who's going to win. Yes, I get it. We go into Vegas and Verstappen, with 3 races left, could wrap up the title. We want it to go down to the wire. We want lots of people competing for that championship. But actually, Red Bull haven't had a walk in the park this year.
Yeah.
And McLaren look like they could well take the Constructors' title for the first time since, I think, 1998 for them. Ferrari are challenging for the first time since 2008. They could win the championship as well. So yes, the Drivers' Championship has kind of died a death early, and Lando Norris didn't get the results he needed to challenge. But each race has been dramatic, exciting. We've had, I think, 7 different winners. You couldn't go into a weekend and back someone wholeheartely and know they were going to win.
Okay.
So I think it has been a good season. And I think next year with Lewis going to Ferrari, that will change the dynamics. There's so much driver movement, loads of rookies coming in. So I think there's plenty to be excited about for next year. And then the regulation changes. And yeah, I think we're in a really rich vein of form when it comes to F1.
Okay, good. Because I saw obviously Verstappen got off to such a good start, and I think at that stage I thought, okay, well, here we go again. So maybe, to be fair, that's my ignorance of the last couple of months. To be fair, you mentioned Lewis Hamilton. Man, it's I mean, he's making it pretty clear to everyone he hates the car. So
you think?
He's leaving for Ferrari. I mean, I again, not that I feel sorry for these multi millionaire superstars with youth and everything else going for them. But poor old Carlos Sainz there at Ferrari, knowing he's been replaced, is no fun. So Hamilton, after the race in Brazil, it was a similar theme. He was asked about the end of the season coming into view. He said, "It can't come soon enough." So George Russell, who's obviously in the same car as him at the moment, is 2 points ahead of him. "I don't care if I finish ahead or behind George. I just want to keep this car out of the wall." score some points for the team. Give me a car that doesn't bounce off the track and hopefully we might get a better result. So this great relationship has completely gone up in smoke.
I think Lewis has always been vocal when he's given a car that he can't drive. And he has struggled with all of the cars since 2022. And he's aware of what he lost in 21. It could have been an 8th world title for him, which would have broken all the records. But it wasn't to be. And each year he turns up getting paid millions of pounds, as you say. But you have to be totally dedicated to drive an F1 car. And to drive an F1 car and be a champion, you have to be 100% focused. Give up everything, pretty much, and dedicate your life to that sport. And I think it's very easy to look at elite sports people and not appreciate exactly what they have given up to be in that or at that level in a sport. And Lewis has given up so much, as have all the drivers. And to get into a car that he can barely win in, that he finds uncomfortable, difficult to drive, it doesn't work with him. And he can't challenge for the championship, which is all he cares about. He cares about winning and getting into a championship challenging car. So I don't know if the relationship has broken down as much as he can't win. And he still has to turn up and try his hardest, knowing, just like Fernando Alonso, for example, he's desperate to win a title, but he can't in the car that he's currently in. So you can imagine how, I suppose, demoralizing that is to turn up for a weekend, think, oh, I might win, and then find out that you're driving a beast of a car that just, you have to, trawl around the track.
Do you ever think that's a failing? And I asked this not knowing even what I think myself. Do you ever think that's a failing of the sport where we want to identify the best driver and yet several of them are on horses that just can't win?
I don't know. It would be amazing if we could see them all in equal cars.
Yeah, I feel they should do that. I mean, not to get into the, let's plug into the entertainment thing too much, but I mean, give me 2 races like that a year where you get triple points for a win, and I watch that one.
I always think that it would be great to start the weekend with the drivers going out in karts.
Okay.
So 3 practice 1, ditch the actual F1 cars, send them out in karts for a race.
Yeah.
And let's see who wins.
Yes.
And then they transfer the points into the actual grid. And that can decide the grid for the actual Grand Prix. I think it would be lovely to see them all in a competitive car. But that's just not how F1 works. No. And even if this year, so there's an Argentinian driver called Franco Colapinto, who's come into Williams. He came in just after the summer break. He'd never driven an F1 car competitively. The postman's just arrived. Post lady, actually. Oh, no, it's okay. We're fine. She hasn't rung the doorbell. At ease. So he's arrived after the summer break with no experience of F1 cars and has amazed people.
Right.
With quite how much raw talent that he actually has, that he has whipped up a storm in the drivers market, and people are looking at him saying, oh, how can we get him? We've already signed 2 drivers, but how can we get this guy who's got millions in the bank from sponsorship, but also is really good? And no one expected that of him, apart from probably him and his team. So yes, you have to be in a championship winning car on the right year at the right time. But you can see how talented these currently 20 guys are, and they demonstrate how good they are week in, week out. So yes, it's annoying that they can't all be in a Red Bull or a Ferrari, but that's not the way the sport works.
No, and I'm very conscious as well. There are lots of people listening who love that technical aspect of the sport and love the minutiae of what different teams are doing, and a clever new innovation has swung the title in Team X's favour. I can see that and appreciate that too. One last one. So I think a consequence maybe of Drive to Survive, or maybe it was always thus and I was too young to kind of be interested in anybody but the drivers, but it does feel like the personality of the team principals is bigger than it's ever been. Toto Wolff and Christian Horner and even Gunter, who was on the show, their stardom now is every bit as big as the drivers in many respects. I don't know how to put this.
Make it good.
I sort of, we just live in a podcast age of like CEO high performance BS, and if you're not doing a plunge pool bath at 6 a.m, then you're nothing. And I feel these guys are on the circuit, and you can go and watch Toto on YouTube talking about all these kind of things. At the same time, I'm sure he's impressive, but I just, maybe cynically, I'm looking at Toto and Christian Horner and I'm kind of thinking, what's the unique skill set here? Or why is Christian Horner getting 10 million a year and Bruno Famin isn't? What separates these guys? What do they do that's so impressive? There's an easy question.
Yeah. And you wanted to end it with this?
Yeah.
I look at these guys, I talk to them week in, week out, and they are extraordinary people. To run that sort of team with thousands of people pouring in to make 2 cars with 2 drivers and manage all of those different departments, manage the media, the expectations, go into battle with F1 sometimes, with the FIA. They are so multifaceted in what they are able to do and do successfully, that they are kind of on another level.
Right, okay.
And they probably do wake up and get into a plunge pool, some of them. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't mind them doing it. I just don't want them to tell me about it.
Do you plunge?
No. But sorry, I don't doubt you're right, actually. I mean, I sort of asked the question from a point of view of cynicism, but I have to, I concede they must be extraordinary. Sometimes it's not immediately obvious,
Look, if you were in a room having to manage, let's say, Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso, who were teammates at one point, and Ron Dennis was managing them, and you just have to go into battle with them and sort out who in that team is the boss. Is it Lewis Hamilton? Is it Fernando Alonso? Is it the technical director who wants to steer the car in one direction? Is it the chief aero who wants to steer it in another direction? You're working with absolute geniuses. Like Adrian Newey is an absolute genius. He designs the best cars probably in the world, certainly in F1. And he is a championship winning designer. So how do you follow him and Lewis Hamilton and all of the other amazing people that you have in your team and get the very best out of them? And you look at the teams and they're so different. The characteristics of Red Bull is so different to the personality and character of Mercedes, for example. And you take Ferrari into that equation of managing the Italians, the Tifosi, and the media and the pressure that you have riding on your shoulders. It's immense. Yeah. And these people are all able to do that and then come to the media and sell their brand. Because let's face it, F1 is a massive sales tool. Without F1, Red Bull would not be as popular or as successful as they are. So it's a real balancing act and a dark art of how you go about getting the best for your team, but keeping everyone happy at the same time and producing a championship winning car at the end of that. It's fascinating to watch, and it's a highly political atmosphere, and it's called the Piranha Club with those team bosses because you have to go in and fight.
Okay, sold.
Well, it's all in my book.
Yes. Well,
if you want to learn more, I mean, it sounds like you're quite knowledgeable.
No.
About F1.
I'm not. I'm a casual observer and obviously journalist to talk about it at times. But no, it's fascinating to get that in-depth knowledge from you. I will be flicking through the book. So it straddles a really nice line. If you're a completely new fan, this really will get you up to speed. And obviously, if you're a veteran, you'll thumb through this, I suspect, and really enjoy so many aspects of it. So listen, to write this during your recovery from a stroke is no mean feat. So congratulations on it. It is called How to Read F1, and people can get it now, I'm sure, online or in bookstores. Jennie, I really enjoyed talking to you. I'm not going to be nice here and make you cry.
Thank you.
But I really enjoyed talking to you, and there is an inspirational aspect to what you're doing, whether you want to engage with that emotionally or not, but there really, really is. And so we'll all follow your progress, I think, Jennie, and don't be a stranger. We might chat to you at the end of the championship, get your thoughts on the year that was or something. But regardless, very best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it as well. And should we both go and plunge now?
Yes, let's plunge and tweet everybody to let them know we did it.
Not together, though.
No. Jennie Gow, thank you so much. Bye-bye.